Shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom, shalom.
Good evening, good evening. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is such a pleasure to get to be together this evening, not only because the Beit HaT'filah is beautifully air-conditioned and it's a little warm and sticky out there, and not only because this is the third in the series of our Demystifying the Service series. If you were with us a month ago, you joined us as we talked about the choreography, the bowing, the bending, the twisting of services. If you were with us 2 weeks ago, you saw how the puzzle pieces of liturgy fit together. And this evening, we're going to be talking throughout the service about some of the changes, adaptations, things the Reform movement has uniquely done to the Friday night service experience. But it's not only the air conditioning or the demystifying the service, but it is a pleasure this evening because we get to welcome for the first official time, it's unclear, on our pulpit.
It wasn't not official before.
That's true. Cantor Kalix Jacobson is joining us. We are so excited to have Cantor Kalix as our teacher, as our musical leader, as our friend, as our pastoral caregiver, as all of the many things that a cantor can bring to our congregation. I hope immediately following the service you will join us for a nosh, for a chance to get to know them a little bit better, and we are so excited that you are here.
Glad to be here.
With that, would you say a couple words to get us, or are you after? You are after Hine Matov. So instead of saying a few words, would you sing? Lead us in song.
Please, my
Friends,
pleasure.
we join on page 10 in our prayer books. It's me who doesn't know the order of the service, not Cantor Kalix. Don't blame them.
It's all good.
We are on page 10, as we are wont to do, words of Hine Matov, how great it is to be together this evening.
Hine ma tovu manayim, Shabbat achim kam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim. achim gam yachad. Hinei ma tov. Shabbat achim gam yachad. Hinei ma tov. Shabbat achim gam yachad. Hinei ma tov u'manayim. 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 Shabbat achim gam yachad. Hinei ma tov, hinei ma tov. La 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 la. Hinei ma tov, hinei ma tov. Ya la 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 la. Hinei ma tov u'manayim. Shabbat achim gam yachad. Hinei ma tov u'manayim. Shabbat achim gam yachad. Well, first of all, thank you, Rabbi Aaron, for your warm welcome. I am so excited to be here, and I'm especially excited to be demystifying Reform values tonight. As we prepare to light the Shabbat candles, it's important to ask why. This is tradition that was codified around 1500 years ago and became more popular over time until it was considered an obligation. As you may have heard in the aforementioned referenced Demystifying the Service series, Shabbat candle lighting is done at home a short amount of time before sunset on Friday nights so that we don't actually perform work by lighting candles during Shabbat itself. Some of you may have already lit Shabbat candles before you came to services. However, we in the Reform movement often choose to light Shabbat candles in synagogue in addition to the home so that all may engage in the mitzvah together. Candle lighting in synagogue is a Reform innovation that allows us to set our kavanah, our intention, for our service together and for the rest of the holy day of Shabbat. Part of how we set our kavanah is to wave our arms 3 times and then cover our eyes so we can focus on the prayer that we are about to say, so that when we open our eyes, we are transported from whole, mundane, to Kodesh, holy, as if almost by divine intervention. I invite you to join with me in the candle blessings, and I'm inviting up my fabulous partner, Mickey Benson, to come light the candles.
Friends, we are on page 2 in your prayer books.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel
Thank you so much, Mickey, and a welcome to you as well. We are on page 5 in our prayer books as we recognize the sweetness of Shabbat with our blessing over the wine over Shabbat, our Shabbat evening kiddush. If it is comfortable for you to do so, we would invite you to rise as we join together on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchilanu
Friends, you are welcome to be seated as we continue, as we prepare for our evening service, singing our way in with words of Psalms, Shiru Ladonai, familiar to us as the text of Psalm 96, found on pages 13 and 14, if you want to flip back and forth, whoopsie, or on the screens before us, if you are with us in the Beit HaT'filah. I'm like 0 for 2 tonight.
You're doing great, you're doing great. Shiru Ladonai, Kol haaretz shiru, shiru Ladonai, shir chadash, shiru Ladonai, shiru Ladonai, Kol haaretz shiru, shiru Ladonai, shir chadash. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Ladonai, Kol haaretz shiru, shiru Ladonai, shir chadash, shir chadash, shir chadash, shir chadash.
Last week, as part of our term Shabbat, you may have heard me joke with Cantorina Shapiro that verses 1, 2, 5, and 9 of Lecha Dodi, our next prayer found on page 20, were likely written at Sinai, and the rest of this poetic prayer added a little bit later. The question, though, is really why do we only sing verses or stanzas 1, 2, 5, and 9? Whatever happened to 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8? Unlike other choices that we might make in our Kabbalat Shabbat service, which may be driven by time considerations, this change is actually ideological. Redemption can only be found in Jerusalem kind of ran afoul of the sensibilities of our ideological ancestors who said we could live fulfilled Jewish lives here in America or wherever we are. And those verses about the destruction of our oppressors just doesn't really put us in the mood for Shabbat, does it? So we stick to the beauty of welcoming the Sabbath bride. We stick to the beauty of Shabbat. And yes, 1, 2, 5, and 9 is shorter than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We continue on page 20.
Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. La 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 lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, hishmiyanu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shem u'tiferet l'tila la 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 lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor haberacha, merosh mikeden nesucha. Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, la 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 lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat
invite you to take this opportunity, having welcomed Shabbat, to turn to welcoming one another. Would you turn to the people around you, wish them a Shabbat Shalom, a happy Sabbath day. Friends, and as your greetings finish up, we invite you to turn to page 24 in our prayer book, that we might continue those greetings, finding our seats, yet welcoming God's ministering angels with words of Shalom Aleichem. Page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bachem, Bachem l'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu Ani L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitchem, Tzeitchem l'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Would you join us in the English on the bottom of page 27? Entrances to holiness are everywhere. The possibility of ascent is all the time, even at unlikely times and through unlikely places. There is no place on earth without the presence.
Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei rabo, ve'almadi ve'rachirute ve'amlich malchotei, ve'chayechon v'yomechon, u'chayed Shar v'troma v'tnasei, v'yithadar v'yit'ale v'yithalal, shemer kodesha b'richu, leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram delma, v'yimeru amen.
Our Baruch praise, page 28, again rising in body or in spirit as it is comfortable to do so.
Lai, 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 Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Ya'elai, 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 ya'elai,
And then together on the top of page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. And on the bottom of page 33, wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol, all these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. The words of Shema and Ve'ahavta, beginning on pages 34 and 35, form a core portion of our service. Yet, similar perhaps to the Chadodi, we only say about half of them in the Reform movement. Where did the other paragraphs, V'haya im shamoa, about rain occurring in its proper season to water our crops and our cattle when we behave according to the mitzvot, and V'asu lahem tzitzit, that we should wear fringes on the corner of our garments, where did these paragraphs go? Again, it does shorten the service, but this was an ideological choice by our ancestors. They understood rain as a scientific rather than a supernatural phenomenon, as we do today. And at that time, we wanted to look a little bit more like our neighbors and didn't want fringes hanging out of the corners of our garments. It's perhaps interesting to note that as more and more Reform Jews have begun to wear a talit, a prayer shawl, in our morning services, that final paragraph about their importance has worked its way back into the morning service, if not into our prayers. We're going to continue with the sections of Shema and Ve'ahavta that we join in together as a community, continuing on pages 34 and 35.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
You are welcome welcome to be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברתם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
If you've ever wondered why there's that little break in the prayer between the top part of the Hebrew and the bottom part of the Hebrew, it's where they would insert those other two paragraphs that we opt not to say. We turn now in our text to something we all say in the Jewish world on page 40, giving thanks not only for the exodus from Egypt, but the giving of Torah and responsibility that came thereafter, words of Mi Chamocha, freedom's praise and promise, found on page 40 in our prayer book.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nora tehilot osei fele, nora tehilot osei fele Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Malchutecha ra'u v'anecha bokei hayam livnei Moshe u'Miriam ze'elianu ve'yameru ze'elianu ve'yameru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Hashkivenu is a prayer asking God to allow us to lie down in peace and then to return to life the next day. However, in this version of this prayer, in Mishkan Tefillah, there is a sneaky insight to our Reform values. Traditionally, the Hashkivenu is recited saying, V'ha'amidenu malkeinu lechayim, and raise us up again, our King, to life. This is not what is said in Mishkan Tefillah, instead saying, V'ha'amidenu shomreinu lechayim, and raise us up again, our guardian, to life. In fact, Gates of Prayer, the predecessor to Mishkan Tefillah, Malkeinu was still used. In the last 20 or so years, the Reform movement has been attempting to remove language about God that is inherently gendered from our prayer books, as our understanding of God as an all-encompassing being evolves over time. Even traditionally, God has names and titles that are not just masculine, but also feminine. We call God Shekhinah, basically a nurturing figure that spreads her wings over us. God even has feminine pronouns in some of our prayers. For example, we say Modim Anachnu Lach, which is feminine, rather than Modim Anachnu Lecha, which is masculine. Reform Judaism is simply acknowledging that God encompasses many and all genders and is making an effort to update certain prayers to reflect our Reform understanding of God. Please join me in reading Hashkivenu in English on page 42. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel, for your name's sake be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and our coming to life and to peace evermore. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
We continue now on the top of page 44, recognizing the blessing that is Shabbat in our lives with words of Vishamru.
Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vaynafash, Shabbat vaynafash, Shabbat vaynafash. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam.
I was only 13 years old at a time when every single thing my mom did was embarrassing. And shouting down the soloist at my bar mitzvah had to take the cake and make me want to shrink under the lectern.
A difficult feat.
Do you remember back to the days of Gates of Blue or Gates of Prayer when Reform congregations, including this one, began pasting in a new version of the Amidah that recognized that women are people too, and that the matriarchs of our tradition, Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel and Leah, deserve to be mentioned along with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? My congregation's old school soloist wasn't ready to make that change. My mom, however, was. And she had the courage and the voice to keep singing their song of inclusion as he tried to push through. He lost. And I'm glad. Thanks, Mom. Welcome back, matriarchs. It's good to have you as a Reformed Jewish value. We continue with these prayers, first on page 46, then 48. No need to sing over one another this time. We'll all say their names together. I invite you to rise as we do so.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai open up my Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor Ve'hanura, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chastei Avot Imahot, U'mevii Geula Lifnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahavat, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Morid HaTal, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishaynei Afar, Michamocha Baal Kevurot, Umidom Melach, Melech Meimit, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, Ve'ne'emanat Ha'chayot HaKol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol, Atah Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kedoshim B'chol Yom Yehalelucha Selah, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
As you've likely picked up, I was in a rather playful mood as I was writing my demystifying paragraphs, including the next one, where I'm not entirely sure that I can trust you people to say these prayers correctly. I think I can now because you have the written words of prayer in front of you. But what if you didn't have a prayer book? Could you accurately recite the blessings from this section of our service? I certainly couldn't, so I'm not really judging you. I'm just pointing out how this section of our service came to be. Prior to having a printed prayer book, the people would say the blessings of the Amidah to the best of their ability, adding their own wants and needs to a traditional framework. The service leader would then repeat those prayers precisely to make sure that everyone was covered. If you've prayed in a conservative or in an Orthodox synagogue, you're familiar with saying the Amidah silently, only to have the service leader repeat it. And now you know why. The early reformers thought this was kind of insulting. And the Reform movement started after the printing press put these books in our hands. I can indeed trust you to say these prayers by yourself. But that silent prayer thing, well, I guess it kind of stuck. So let's do it. You might continue with the words through page 60, adding those words of your own heart, saying the precise words on the page as you see fit. And when you've finished your prayers, or when you feel like it, we invite you to be seated. We continue with our evening prayer for peace, words of Shalom Rav, found on page 60 in our prayer books.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam Ki Ata hu Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom Lechol HaShalom Ki Ata hu Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom Lechol HaShalom Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam V'tov V'tov Be'einecha levarech Et Amcha Yisrael Et Amcha Yisrael Bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך בשלומך שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם לעולם לעולם.
On page 253 in our prayer book, we have Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for those who are ill, those perhaps in this room, and those perhaps in our hearts, whom we pray, whom we wish for a healing of body, of mind, of spirit. If there are those you are thinking of for our prayer of healing, and you are comfortable sharing their names aloud, we invite you to do so at this time. Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, God, who brings a measure of comfort to all who are ill. We continue, page 253.
Mishaberach Avoteinu Mekor HaBaracha and let us say, Amen. Mishabeirach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu, bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Sometimes when the Reform movement was making changes to the service, it did as we do for Lecha Dodi, to leave the words intact and opt which words we're going to say. Sometimes, when our early reformers were making changes to the service, they added those words that would add extra meaning, including the matriarchs. And sometimes they chose to leave things out. At the first Demystifying the Service, I shared that the rabbis of Jewish tradition weigh in pretty heavily against opening the ark for Aleinu L'Shabach. Did you know that they tried really hard to stop us from offering these words at the conclusion of every service as well? It's not a terribly dignified prayer, or at least it wasn't until the Reform movement got a hold of it. Shehem mishtachavim lechevel varik umitpalalim el lo yoshia. They, and I quote, bow down to emptiness and vanity and pray to a God who can't save them. It's not a particularly kind thing to say about our neighbors in faith. And even worse was the Jewish custom that still exists in parts of the Jewish world to spit on the floor in disgust when saying these words as part of Aleinu L'Shabach. Please don't spit on my floor. I tell you what, to make Aleinu even possible, let's just drop out these incendiary words altogether and pray for a time when God is present throughout the whole world. Sounds a little bit better when we do it that way, doesn't it? I think so too. We invite you to continue with us the bottom of page 282, page 282, as indeed we open the ark. As we continue in words of prayer, Aleinu L'Shabach, we invite you to rise that is comfortable.
Aleinu L'Shabach la'adon ha'kol, la'tet gedula li'yotzer b'reshit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech, malachei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yihyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
Welcome to be seated. And I'd invite you to go back to page 282. You can blame Rabbi Emily for egging me on and asking me from her seat, or criticizing what I chose to say and asking me to add something more at the risk of turning this into a class. You will notice that page 282 and 283 are the only pages in this prayer book where the traditional words of prayer aren't found on the upper right-hand corner of the page. We always do the version of Aleinu on the bottom of the page. If you're curious why that may be, this fight over which words we should be saying as part of this prayer predates this prayer book, predates the Union prayer book, that the words on the top part of the page actually come to us from David Einhorn in Baltimore rather than from Isaac Mayer Wise. Isaac Mayer Wise, the precursor of our prayer book, wrote the words on the bottom, editing out the problematic words. David Einhorn, a proponent of more radical reform altogether, said it's not even fair to say the words, "We open up a world where everyone prays to the same God." Perhaps instead we should pray to a God who established creation that we as Jews recognize. It is perhaps more in keeping with our values today. It's just a lot harder to fit into the melody we all know, so we continue to say the words on the bottom of page 282. True story. We turn now to words of Kaddish Yatom, our mourner's prayer, on page 294. These words invite us to bring to mind those whom we have lost, and we remember one we have lost in recent days, Robin Schneider. And we commemorate the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Carla Barenbaum, Shirley Bleiberg, Louis Calgaro, Mary Cohen, Ben Zion Eisenberg, Esther Fisher, Bernard L. Gollum, Robert Gordon, Florence Miriam Gubernick, J. Chick Hausman, Bernard Herman, Martin Herman, Betty Hubert, Harold Hubert, Robert Harry Lang, Helen Lebovitz, Ida Levy, Marvin Lichtenstein, Elizabeth Marcus, Sadie Mates, Lawrence I. Miller, Toba Myers, Bessie Bremen Osgood, Joyce Y. Palmieri, Dorothy Rydboard, Carolyn R. Reesberg, Jack Robbins, Mildred Rosenberg, David Rubenstein, Erwin Rubenstein, Morris Rubenstein, Ruth Schneirov, Tilly Schumacher, Marjorie L. Schwager, Max Silverman, David Howard Staff, Mildred Stern, Louis Taffler, Sam Trachtenberg, Bertha S. Thompson, and William Wolfson. If there are others you are remembering this Shabbat, or if I have inadvertently mispronounced the name of a loved one, I would invite you to share their name at this time.
Shirley Rosenbaum.
Yehei zichronam livracha. May the memory of all of our loved ones be for us an everlasting blessing. Cantor.
Reciting the Kaddish in the way we do in Reform synagogues may be one of the most inherently Reform things we do in the service. The Kaddish, in all of its various forms, is in Aramaic, the most common spoken language of Jews in the 13th century when it was written. Saying at least some prayers in a native tongue is one of the most Reform values there is. In the first Reform services, every prayer was recited in German, the language of the innovators of Reform Judaism. In America, English-speaking Jews recited prayers primarily in English until the mid-20th century, until tastes began to shift. However, even though we recite many of our prayers in Hebrew now, we have many English readings. We did some of them earlier in the service, and our services are not entirely in Hebrew, specifically so that our services are accessible to anyone who wants to come and pray. Secondly, the way that we choreograph our Mourner's Kaddish recitation, at least in this point in time, is inherently a Reform innovation. Typically, it is only mourners who were supposed to stand for Kaddish as an indicator of who in the group was mourning. However, in the recent aftermath of the Holocaust, it was common for everyone to stand in remembrance of the 6 million Jews who were killed. And as time has passed, the reason that we stand as a group has morphed instead into a supportive effort for the mourners in our congregation as not to isolate them.
So indeed, at this time, we'd invite everyone to rise, those who are in mourning and those in support of those who mourn, those who are remembering throughout the generations of the Jewish people, as we join together in these words on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam U'Lamei Amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aleh V'yithalal Shmei D'Kudsha B'richu Le'elah Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush B'chata V'nechamata D'amiran D'alma V'imru Amen. Yehi Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Osei Shalom Mimramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May God, who makes peace in the highest of heavens, make peace for us and for all who mourn. And together we say, Amen. You're welcome to be seated. To say a word of thank you immediately following Mourner's Kaddish tonight seems particularly appropriate, for among all of the people that we have to thank for tonight's service, a special thank you goes to Temple member Betty Diskin, whose amazing legacy and generosity to this community has made it possible for us as a community to welcome and ordain Cantor into our midst, to welcome Cantor Kalix Jacobson, and we are forever indebted to Betty Diskin. A tremendous thank you as well to those who are in the room with us, who are joining us in sacred virtual community, to Leslie for helping connect those two spaces, as well as to you, Cantor. It is a pleasure to have you on the pulpit, to have you as a leader in this congregation, and I am so excited that you are with us. We're going to be celebrating Cantor Kalix for a long time. They are worth celebrating, not only at the Oneg immediately following tonight's service, but a big formal welcome once we get through the high holidays. They're coming. In the month of October, you'll hear much more about the formal installation and welcome, but we hope you will take the informal opportunity throughout the slightly more quiet time of summer to get to know them, to get to welcome Mickey as well, and again, including at the Nosh immediately following our service. Let us conclude, though, with words that encapsulate many of the Reformed Jewish values that pervade our service and, God willing, our lives. Words from our 2019 Sejuit Scholar in Residence, Menachem Creditor, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, may we build this world from love.
Ooh, yadadai, dai, yadadai, dai. Ooh, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed, olam chesed yibalei, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. 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 I will build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And you must build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And if we build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai, then God will build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.